Okay, now I wanted to talk, hopefully this will be a short video about your conclusions for your, primarily for your informative speeches. Again, some of the rules are a little bit different for persuasive speeches, but I wanted to talk to you about the four qualities of a good conclusion. And again, these are also in your quick reference guide to public speaking. So the first thing you need to do in your conclusion, and it seems kind of obvious, but you need to basically remind the audience of what you've just told them. Um, I, who is it that says? I think actually it's, or at least it's been attributed, excuse me, to Abraham Lincoln, who said, um, "What you need to do is to tell the audience what you're going to tell them, and then tell them that you've told them." So obviously the first is in the introduction, the second is in the body, and the third is in the conclusion. And sometimes it feels like, oh, maybe you're beating your audience over the head by even in a 5 or 6 or 7 minute speech, telling them once again what you've just informed them about. But the nature of verbal communication is that it's fleeting, that at least live verbal communication, it's fleeting. Once we've spoken those words, they have literally flown from our mouth, and they're not there to be recaptured. And so when an audience has something in writing, they can go back and refer to it. Again, one of the interesting things for me about recording these little mini lectures for you guys is it's a strange kind of combination of both the verbal, because obviously I'm speaking to you, but also it's providing a digital record. So in fact, you can go back over if you've missed something in one of these videos and capture it again for your notes. But in live performance, there isn't the ability to rewind a live speaker. And so knowing that, there is a need for audiences to have main points reinforced for them, reminding them of what they've just learned today, what the takeaway message from today's speech is. So again, a good conclusion, particularly as you transition from the body of your speech to your conclusion, your transition should signal to your audience that you're moving into wrapping it up mode, so that audiences like to psychologically know when a conclusion is coming. There's nothing stranger, and I'm sure you've been to speeches or you've heard speeches where the speaker seems to end abruptly because they haven't appropriately signaled for the audience that the conclusion is coming. Now, sometimes it's something as obvious as, "and in conclusion," or "wrapping up this conversation," or as some final thoughts on the matter, but certainly phrases can signal to the audience that you are moving towards your conclusion. And audiences need to have this generally done for them. So the first thing in a good conclusion, once you've transitioned into the conclusion and warn the audience that the conclusion is happening, is to remind them of what they've learned here today. You can certainly do this by referring back to your introduction and maybe how you introduce the topic to them at the beginning. Certainly, another quality of a conclusion is providing a sense of closure for your audience. And again, that closure can often be provided by what I call that going full circle, where you refer back to your introduction. You may even reference the funny story that you told them at the beginning, the quote that you gave them, the statistic that you gave them. Audiences like the general sense of things being wrapped up in a way that creates a sense of closure, almost in a cyclical or circular kind of manner. So sometimes referring back to some quote or some story or some illustration in your introduction is a great way to not only emphasize the point of your speech, but to give them a sense of that kind of closure, that wrapping up of your ideas. Also, your conclusion should somehow, even in the case of an informative speech, give your audience some sort of a sense of elevation, or kind of an emotional elevation, which may involve a new way of thinking, a possible action that they may now engage in after having heard your speech. So you want to inspire them or motivate them as they go out into the world, even with just this newfound information. Certainly in the case of a persuasive speech, which we'll talk about at greater length, there often is a action step that If you've persuaded your audience, it could very well be that you want them to do something, to sign an organ donor card, to vote for a candidate, to take a safety course, to stop engaging in a particular destructive behavior. And so there is an explicit action step in some types of persuasive speaking. But even in an informative speech, you want your audience to feel good about themselves, good about the speech, so some sort of an emotional high point or possibly a motivation as they go out into the world. And it may be appropriate to reemphasize your speaker credibility. Again, you don't want to dwell a whole lot on this, but somehow putting yourself back into the topic, connecting to your audience somehow that shows that you have that goodwill towards them, that there's value in having had this conversation with them, how you had learned this particular lesson. So some sort of a personal reference to you again, a very quick one, but which again reestablishes your credibility, connects you to the topic, connects you to the audience. Okay, so I think that should be it. But again, in the conclusion of your speech, you've transitioned to the conclusion. You've signed for your audience that you're moving into the conclusion. You've restated the purpose of your speech, particularly in an informative speech. You have provided some closure for that audience in terms of knowing that you've come full circle and that there's an elegant ending to that speech. Oh, one thing actually I should mention is even in an extemporaneous speech, I think it's okay to script the last sentence or so of your speech. As a speaker, you don't want to end a speech with and well, that's it, I'm done. You don't want to dribble off towards the end. So if it helps you to think about the last sentence or two and have that scripted out so that you can end gracefully, end elegantly, so that your audiences clearly know when you stop speaking, your speech is reached its conclusion. So provide closure, restate the purpose of your speech, re-emphasize your credibility, and then provide some sort of motivation or emotional high point for your audience as they go out into the world. Okay.